Hi, I'm Ivy, pronouns she, her. I'm the founder and director of Thrive Therapy and Counseling, where we specialize in helping highly sensitive people navigate all aspects of life. And today I want to talk about a topic that is often really challenging for sensitive people, and that is setting boundaries in their relationships. As highly sensitive people, we tend to be very nice and very empathetic. And these qualities can be huge strengths in many parts of our lives. And they can also lead to challenges when we're trying to say no or set boundaries with other people. And in fact, sometimes we even forget that setting boundaries isn't selfish and that boundaries actually help us take care of ourselves and maintain our relationships. And they're essential to our well being, especially as sensitive, empathetic people. So, let's take a moment to talk about why it's hard for us to set boundaries, and then also identify some gentle but effective ways to set them without completely drowning in guilt. So, you can probably throw out your own ideas about why it's hard to set boundaries as a sensitive person. Uh, but a lot of it comes down to how we're wired to feel deeply and really notice subtleties around us, which means we really pick up on it if someone is disappointed by what we say, and we don't like to disappoint other people. So we pick up on that emotion and we might even, feel responsible for it. As sensitive people, we also tend to avoid conflict. It can cause us a lot of stress. I know I'm right there with you. I hate dealing with conflict, and it's something I really have to ground myself and make myself show up to do when necessary. We often also feel responsible for other people's happiness. And again, setting boundaries usually comes about when there's a difference between what I want and I need and between what you want and you need. And so then that naturally leads to conflict and disappointment. And as highly sensitive people, we can even worry that we're going to come across as being rude or uncaring if we set a boundary. But in fact, setting those boundaries do help us maintain healthy connection. Because if we don't set them, then we can overgive, right? Or continue to show up until we're exhausted and we have nothing else left. So, as sensitive souls, it's actually really crucial that we manage and protect our resources and our energy so that we can continue to share it with the people we care about. So remember, when we think about boundaries, it's actually about caring for others, not about controlling them. So when you're struggling, remind yourself that boundaries aren't about keeping people away, but they're about letting the right energy in. And when you set a boundary, you're being clear. And that's actually a kind way to be and to show up in your relationships. So let's break down what are 5 ways to set boundaries with less guilt. Because let's be realistic, the guilt's probably never going to completely go away. We feel our emotions pretty strongly, and some sense of that's going to be there. But let's aim to decrease it and make it more manageable. So, tip number 1 is take a pause before you say yes. As a highly sensitive person, you might just reflectively want to say yes to avoid letting anybody down. Your people pleasing may kick in real strong, but instead, practice slowing down. You can say something like, let me check my calendar and get back to you. Or, you know what, let me sleep on it and let you know tomorrow, right? Or even just a simple, let me think about it can give you some time to reflect before you follow up with an answer. And delaying is actually one of my favorite ways to slow myself down so I don't just jump right in and then either instantly regret it or regret it later. So, tip number two is to use gentle, honest language, remembering that you don't have to over explain or justify. So just keep it kind and simple. You can say something like, I'd love to help, but I don't have the bandwidth right now. Or I need some quiet time to recharge this weekend. Or I'm sorry, but that doesn't work for me, but thank you for understanding, right? So just simple and to the point. And remember that saying things like this It's true for all of us sometimes. I think every person, or at least most every person, can recognize not having the bandwidth or needing time to recharge. So, tip number three is to know your non negotiables. So, be really clear on what drains you and on what nourishes you. So know like if you need something like to have some quiet time after a social event or a busy work day, or if you need to limit screen time or news exposure, or reduce the time that you're around people who are negative or critical. Or be aware if you need to build enough alone time into your routine or to make sure that you don't overfill your schedule. Because once you recognize what your needs are, it's going to be easier for you to feel more confident in knowing you need to protect them in order to protect your energy. Tip number four is expect to feel some discomfort, right? It's okay if you feel uncomfortable when you're setting boundaries, but that does not mean that you're doing something wrong. And in fact, discomfort is a sign of growth, especially when you're at the edge of your comfort zone. And guilt, it can be a helpful emotion and it kicks in naturally when we do something that we believe is wrong or when we've acted out of alignment with our values. But if you know that you value having downtime, you haven't gone against that value by declining an invitation to a social event. And you've actually done the opposite by being true to yourself. So, guilt in that example, it's not really valid. Even if it's there, it doesn't match. Right. So sometimes we have to practice shifting our mindset away from the unhelpful expectations we've been taught. No, we cannot please other people all the time, no matter how much we wish we could. And then with practice, we can start trusting ourselves more, which can also help the guilt lessen when we know why we're doing what we're doing. And tip number five for setting boundaries is to remember that you teach other people how to treat you. When you consistently set boundaries, you actually model healthy self care and healthy relationships. And you invite relationships based on mutual respect, not people pleasing. You also model that it's okay to say no sometimes, and that a relationship can be maintained and even strengthened through that. So, as a highly sensitive person, I hope you can remember that your ability to empathize and care deeply is really beautiful. But to care for others well, you need to take care of yourself first. And boundaries make that possible, right? And remember, you don't have to choose between being kind or being clear because you can be both. So I hope these tips are helpful the next time, you find yourself in a situation where you need to say no, or you need to slow down, or you need to say something that, might disappoint someone else. Right. I wish you well out there and may you take care of yourself as a highly sensitive person and live the life that's going to make you the happiest. All right. Take care.